Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekanandasure Satchit Sukhaswarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So we had concluded last week's discussion at the point at which Yama starts actually giving a precise answer to this question of Nachiketa. What is the question? I mean, as we have said this before, but I think it's worth repeating that any Upanishad addresses a serious and deep existential question which pertains to something universal in human existence. In this case, what is it? It's an experienced fact, not some abstract philosophical cogitation, certainly not some theological speculation. What was the question that the whole thing started off with? It was precisely this: Ya iyam prete vichikitsa manushye asti iti eke nayam asti iti cha eke. When a person dies, some say that he or she is dead and gone, nothing remains. Some say that he or she continues to be. And he asks, what is the truth about this question? So the thing is, this question is being asked on behalf of all of us. If it's not something that we are interested in, if it's not a question that bothers us, then this particular topic, this subject, the subject of the Upanishads is not for us. So those of us to whom the fact of mortality, the fact that we shall cease to be in this common sense way in which we are accustomed to being, this fact bothers, or not just for us, that our people we are fond of pass away, and then pass away meaning they die physically, and it bothers, at least for a while. Are they there? Are they gone? In what sense are they there, if at all, or are they really gone completely? And is that answer, I mean, basically any answer to this question needs to be subjectively satisfactory, because without such a completely satisfactory answer, grasped by one's whole being, it will just remain some kind of a belief system or some kind of theology that you docket away somewhere in your head. And when a situation arises, when the answer to this question is needed for us in a fairly fundamental way, then this kind of cogitation or intellectual docketing will not be of any use. And so far, and this is the way the Upanishads travel, essentially they first prepare the ground by giving fairly cursorily answers in terms of things which have to do with either rituals or practices or something which is essentially a part of the karma kanda. Then it slowly progresses to contemplation, what is called upasana. What do we meditate on? Think deeply about. It's called vidya in generally. Vidyate anaya iti vidya. That by which, the means by which one gains a window into reality, particularly qualified by the question that we have asked. And then once the mind is ready, then only the answer is given, because before that the answer will make no sense. And so prior to this, what has been talked about, this pranava or onkara, this is basically a method of upasana, essentially a training of the mind so that it is concentrated and focused and clear. It's preparing the mind for the answer. And now, once this preparation is done, So that's why he started off with that there are these two things, Shreyascha Preyascha Manushyameta Tau Abhidhyayan Vivinakti Dhiraha. Yeah. So it's basically the mind has to be first trained in this capacity to discriminate, analyze that which is of temporary significance, that which is of long-term significance. The capacity of the mind to discriminate, to analyze, and dispense with what is clutter, dispense with what is inessential. That training of the mind is very necessary, because without that, if Yama gives the answer, or whoever, this answer is provided, it will make no sense, it will fall on deaf ears. So that was the first thing, basically saying that, look, you need to train your mind in this capacity to analyze, but not just that, to focus, to train the mind to first analyze means it essentially separates out that which is essential. That's one. Second, it's important to be able, the mind needs to be trained also in this power to hold on to this essential question. This kind of strength of mind which A, dispenses with the inessential, B, focuses on the essential. It's the obverse and reverse of the same thing, but the mind needs training on both sides. That is what was given so far. With the mind now receptive, the answer is given. And this is where we had stopped last time. Now Yama answers the question, what becomes of a man when the body dies? See, now because it's the discrimination has been clear, and it's after all Vivekananda is talking about it, so that's why he makes this question fairly precise. What becomes of a person or a man when the body dies? Death is of the body, but what becomes of he who was dwelling in it? This analysis, somehow or the other, the way Vivekananda translates it, it's clear that there is a discriminatory intellect that is addressed. A mind that is capable of analyzing and having arrived at the conclusion that this death of the body is what is the end of physical existence. What is left, if anything? This precise formulation of the question is necessary at this stage. Then he reads out this answer. This wise one never dies, is never born. It arises from nothing, and nothing arises from it. Unborn, eternal, everlasting. This ancient one can never be destroyed with the destruction of the body. If the slayer thinks he can slay, or if the slain thinks he is slain, they both do not know the truth. For the self neither slays nor is slain. And here's the original, which we had again stated last time. We repeat that. Na jayate mriyate va vipaschit. Vipaschit here means wise. There's a shloka in the Bhagavad Gita which is a close parallel, but this is the original. The Upanishads precede the Gita, and here it is in answer to a specific question that the answer is given. Na jayate mriyate va vipaschit. Vipaschit means wise. This wisdom, or the wise one, that which is the essence of all our existence, that wisdom, that is never born nor dies. Na jayate mriyate va vipaschit. Na ayam kutaschit, na babhuva kaschit. It is not that it arises from another cause, or equivalently, it arises from itself. Yeah, these are the two alternate explanations. that Shankara gives in his bhashya to this mantra. We'll come back to that. Ajo nitya shashvata ayam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Nayam kutashchit. So this is let's get back to that particular line because it's fairly important and critical. Nayam kutashchit na babhuva kaschit. It is not that it arises from something else, which means what really? See, the question that is asked naively presupposes some framework. What is that framework? What is the common sense kind of framework from which a person asks, after death, where shall I go? Somehow or the other, the person's awareness, consciousness, self-identity is identified with the body, and therefore this body is going to go away. So my only idea of myself is myself with this body. Therefore, some other kind of body is something that I'll adopt and push off, or not. That's the origin, that's the genesis of the question. This is the psychological root from which this question is arising. But what's the answer given? This pure consciousness or this Atman. It is not caused by anything else, nor is it the cause of anything else. In other words, it lies outside the framework, outside the naive framework, which gave rise to the question that was asked. Not the way Nachiketa asked. Nachiketa wants a proper answer. But at a first casual reading, without probing the depths of that question, our instinctive instincts would tell us, try to get answers in terms of something that we are comfortable with, something that is in our comfort zone. Oh yeah, this particular body is going to go away, then you're going to go into a heaven where there are all these pleasantries, etc., etc. This is the kind of answer that was being sought. Or, equivalently, the other side, which is the extreme atheistic point of view, this body is all that is, it's gone, there's nothing left. These are so this is the theistic versus the atheistic point of views that are there, and it's in these terms typically that answers are given. But the answer here is not given in terms of either of these. That's to be made clear. What it does, it probes the question itself to get at the foundations of what this question should really mean. And it basically says that, look, it depends really on how you identify yourself. If you think, if your self-identity is entirely focused on this physical body, then there is no way out. This physical body is going to die and be decomposed into its various constituent elements. No way out there. But then, is that, it also comes with a question, is that really all you think you are? And with that question, this investigation into subjective consciousness starts. And then basically says that pure consciousness, that which you cannot really be conceptualized, is really the substratum of this notion of causality. It is, we are aware of this causality as a structure through which we grasp the world. Does that structure of causality vanish anywhere in our daily experience? If not, then we would have absolutely no empirical evidence mind to infer that this kind of thing, that answer that is being given, has a real chance of being correct. The point is, each one of us has that experience. Each one of us. What is it? When we are in deep sleep, it's an experience of nothingness, so to speak. But nothingness involves that the structure of causality vanishes from the mind. Which means if we are to probe our psyche in depth, when we need to take into account all our entire experience of something and experience of nothing. And it is in that experience of nothing that we see, at least infer from our waking state experience, that, oh, there was this instance where this notion of causality vanished altogether. Simultaneously, the notion of time vanished altogether. The subjective awareness of time was no longer there. Sukha maham aswapsam na kinchit avedisham. I did not know anything. I was not aware of any objective reality. It is only because our awareness is conflated, confused with the object of awareness that we assume that this is all that there is. What this does is it challenges the foundations of this assumption and asks us to probe deeper in a way that this foundational assumption is uprooted from the mind. Why? Because without challenging this foundational assumption, no real answer can be given to this question. It's only when we have analyzed, discriminated, and separated out that which is changeful in our identity from the changeless, that which is not captured in time and causality, and that which is. If one says that all of my being is captured in time and causality, then the answer to this question is not. Then the answer is the question, if the question was, does anything survive? Well, if your answer is that all my entire existence is all that, only something that changes, well then, it is the body, it is the mind, and it is going to perish. No way out. So then, be satisfied with that answer because you're not willing to give up this assumption. What this answer does is it challenges this assumption. It basically says there is no real ground. Because if you ask the more fundamental question, what really is experience? The generalization of all this that one sees, tastes, feels, thinks, etc. What is the substratum? What is the common generalization of all of this? Then, does this generalization, this that is the awareness in my thinking, this awareness in my feeling, this awareness in my tasting, touching, etc., etc., that element of awareness which is common to all this, does that arise? And there are two kinds of answers that are given depending on one's philosophical tastes. And both are non-dualistic in nature. One is the Madhyamaka school of Buddhism, the other is Advaita Vedanta. And they are really talking of the same thing. देखिए, आपको अगर बात करना है, आप बाहर जाके बात कर लीजिए, ठीक है? ये बात करने की जगह नहीं है. Okay, so the thing is, So that's what needs to be analyzed and separated out. And so this Buddhist attitude is basically says that there are these individual pieces of awareness. To say that there is a separate thing called consciousness is not tenable. There is consciousness only when we individuate it, which means in a sight of something, there is this consciousness qualified by it. In a taste, that this awareness of the taste, there is this consciousness conflated with it. So also in our feelings, our thoughts, etc. On the other hand, what the Vedantin says is basically that this, in and through all this tasting, thinking, feeling, there is this common generalization which is the essence of isness, existence. Yeah? And depending on which point of view one takes, it's basically trying to express in language something that gives rise to language, and therefore these points of view will arise. Because after all, the linguistic framework is inadequate. And if one takes these two standpoints simultaneously and tries to look at one and the other, then the futility of capturing any of these things in a framework is going to dawn on us, and then finally we will be forced to get into this pre-lingual awareness. These are words, but they are indicating something in our experience, and we'll be forced towards that. Which means we'll be forced to act, to do, to practice, to investigate, to perform inquiry, to perform further, deeper inquiry, and desist from trying to say all of this can be captured in words, etc., etc. Our naive belief system is to be challenged, is to be asked questions of, and proceed. I mean, not just for the sake of intellectual cogitation, but to get at a subjectively satisfying answer. Yeah? And so, independent of which of these non-dualistic attitudes one takes, I mean, if you, in terms of practice, actual practice of actual inquiry, there's hardly anything to choose between these two. It's the way one formulates them, the intellectual superstructure that that is built on top of this actual inquiry. I mean, just as you do some inquiry in terms of experiments in a laboratory, does it really matter whether you express that in Hindi or French or English? Not quite. One has to get at this answer. Yeah? Basically, the same attitude, the same way that we feel that koi kisi ko ghadi ko kaha, ya somebody calls it watch. It doesn't matter. Yeah? These are two ways of referring to the same thing. So also at this fundamental level, this via negativa way approach of the Madhyamaka and the via positiva in some sense of Advaita, they really are talking about the same thing, because when it explains this particular verse itself, it's supposed to be an Advaita school of thought, or the origin of Advaita. And how is the answer being given? Na jayate, na mriyate. Yeah? That means, again, the answer is given in this na iti form. Yeah? This is really what this inquiry is about. It's not just this. It's not just this. Which means, this idea that one had of something is born and something dies, and then one is asking, does it mean that I am going to die and be finished? If a person dies, is that person finished? And the answer now is being given, what is your idea about yourself? So long as you think of yourself as an entity that came into existence, it was born, it was caught in the framework, in the causal framework. then there is no way out. But challenge that assumption, that foundational assumption is really coming simultaneously with this awareness that this I that was there, that was born, that grew up, is the same I that is unchanging with the change of my body. Is that an illusion? Or is that real and this change an illusion? Illusion may be too strong a word. The correct expression may be convention. Something that we take to be conventionally true, but needs to be challenged. It's the challenging of these conventions that give rise to fundamental thinking, fundamental inquiry. Not challenging for the sake of challenging, or not challenging in order to just try to appear smarter than the next guy. That's of no use. But with the aim of getting a proper answer that is satisfactory, something that is real. So I have to, this reminds me, see, when Ernest Hemingway, famous author, is a Nobel laureate in literature, wrote this book, Old Man and the Sea. And that was the book that was cited as the latest piece of work for his Nobel Prize. He was asked subsequently, what does this mean? I hope some of you have read this book. What does this mean? What does this story of a fisherman in a sea, fishing for fish in a sea, really mean? What is the connotation? What did you want to convey? And Hemingway's answer was rather unusual. He said, I wanted to write about a real fisherman fishing for real fish in a real sea. And if that story is real, it'll mean many things to many people. And so, here, it's very convenient to get caught in various intellectual superstructures in words and philosophical and theological structures and go on and on and on endlessly, ad infinitum, ad nauseum with them. But that's not the aim. The aim is to get at what is real in this inquiry. And one started with something which is a very empirically real experience. Secondary, but no doubt real. Namely, the experience of death. And here what one is doing is one is metaphorically facing death. Looking at the face of death. This is what this the story of Yama means. Essentially, it's asking questions of my death. Something that is very intensely real to me. Our brains are somehow or the other hardwired in order to, this is a genuine fact. Actually, it can be tested and proven by, in terms of neuroscience, that the brain somehow or the other tends to believe that bad things happen to other people. It never happens to me. Yeah. In particular, death is not going to happen to me. Huh? We've said this before, right? Kimascharyaatah param. Yudhishthira Yaksha Prashna. Ahanyahani bhutani gachanti yamamandiram sheshasthiramichanti kimascharyaatah param. And then there are various pieces of poetry. Yeah. There's a beautiful poem of Rabindranath. I'll just say the word. Ato chupi chupi kano kotha kao go maron hemor matan. So basically, he's addressing, the poet is addressing death and say, why do you come with such? I think it's been translated by William Radice, who's passed away recently. Why do you come with such soft feet, O death? Yeah, and it goes on. It's a beautiful poem. Anyway, but this was the real question with which we started, and therefore, it would be a real pity if at this stage we did not take the answer and look at the answer head on and face the real issue and get get misdirected, just glance off the answer. And so here when he gives the answer, he basically says, look at the foundation of your psyche. What is your self-identity? Do you think of yourself as caught within the framework of causality? Nayam kutaschit na babhuva kaschit. Or do you think that the real entity that you are asking about is the foundation of causality? It is on which this notion of causality rests. This subjective awareness which grants reality to the notion of time, to the notion of causality. That which grants reality to time, that which grants reality to causality, that is your object of inquiry or the subject of inquiry. What is it? How are we going to catch hold of it? And that's how the hint is given. Ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. That substratum, that which grants reality to causality, that which grants reality to time, that is unborn. Almost literally. Why? Because that which is born and that which dies, by definition, is something that is caught within causality. That which grants reality to causal structures is not. So, hence, ajaha. Jaha means janma. Yeah? Ajo, that is not born. Because it's not born, it is not caught in time or causal structures. Nitya, permanent, unaffected by the passage of time. Shashvataha, unchanging, very similar words. And then Purana. Purana, again, is the literal meaning, and this is Shankara. Pura api nava eva. Pura means that which was there in the ancient times. Even though it was there, it's eternally new, nava eva, all as if it's new. Yeah? Which means not affected by the passage of time again. It was there before, it's there now, as if it's eternally new and fresh. That is really what you are after, Nachiketa is being told here. That na hanyate hanyamane sharire. That which was not born does not die at death. Not conditioned by one's various actions, and it is not an individuated thing. We think of ourselves as individuals, and as soon as we inquire, that individuality seems to be a fictitious construct. Does not withstand inquiry. But such is our instinct. And in Sanskrit, these instincts are called samskara. This is the hardwiring in our brains. This instinct, somehow or the other, makes us behave as if we are individual entities. But if we really are interested in a true answer, then it involves dissolving this fake personality, this fake individuality. Asking what is universal in that person's individuality, my individuality, this laptop's individuality, this phone's individuality, etc., etc. We very conveniently divide things into living, non-living, me, other, etc., etc. But here, the inquiry is in terms of this subject, in a certain vague sense. What is it? I mean, this is, I think, another philosopher called Nagel. What does it mean for a bat to feel or think as a bat? Which means we look at other people, infer that they have minds, they have existences, they have feelings. Much in the way that I have feelings, I have thoughts, I have experiences. But what is universal in all this? That's the question. Is it something If there is not something common, then a doctor would not be able to treat patients if every person individual was a separate being. It's universal principles of knowledge that guide action. So which means, go probing to that level, this universal principle of knowledge is something that is common to everything. What is that principle? That which is there in me and that which is there in what we call the all, that which we call the other. It is dissolving the difference between me and the other that leads to this enquiry into universality. The universal subject, or that which is universal in subjective experience. What are the points at which we need to start in order to execute this enquiry? And there is no better way than this particular, again from the Kenopanishad, Pratibodha Viditam Matam. In and through every act of awareness. See, after all, we are supposed to be finding something universal in the subjective experience. But our subjective experience is there with us all the time. Which means in and through every act of awareness, seeing, smelling, tasting. Let the mind sort of become a little quiescent and become aware of itself. Yeah? People give this comparison. It's as if a fish that was swimming was not aware of water, suddenly becomes still and perceives that all that it was moving around in was water. For us, we move around on the surface of the earth, not aware that we are breathing in and breathing out some oxygen. Yeah? Doesn't matter what we call it, but there is this instinctive functioning that we do as beings in order to preserve our lives. It's becoming aware of that breath, which is lending us the right to live at this moment. Which is why, that's why it's in practice, as I said. The Madhyamaka procedure in practice, or the Vedantic process in practice, is not different. Exactly this Pratibodha Viditam Matam, concretely translated, what do the Buddhists talk about? They talk about cultivating awareness, called mindfulness. What is it? Become aware. First step, there is this breath which is both conscious and unconscious. Yeah? If we are not aware of it, it goes on unconsciously. And then suddenly we become aware of it and take a deep breath. Yeah? It's becoming aware of this breath, which is partly unconscious, that starts giving rise to greater and greater awareness in us. Vivekananda talks about it because we are, at least in places like Mumbai, for instance, a lot of our day-to-day involvement is in some work. The work ethic is highly well developed here. And so, what would be the way out? Whatever one is doing, to be done with full awareness and full attention and full focus. It is this cultivation of full awareness without allowing the mind to be distracted from the job at hand. What does that do? It allows us to gain an insight into the truth behind these statements. If we just took the statements to be things like caskets of words, then we would have lost the purpose of this exercise. Chandogya said, Vacharambhanam vikara namadheyam mrittika ityeva satyam. That awareness which flashes through our feelings, through our thoughts, through our sights, is what is universal. That is the thing that we need to catch and see, that this enquiry into this I, this identity, once we identify with that, then that identity is going to continue flashing through the senses, through thoughts, through feelings. But we will not be disturbed from that center. This centricity of being, is what is to be cultivated in order to catch a glimpse at least of the truth behind this statement, na jayate mriyate va vipaschit nayang kutaschit na babhuva kaschit ajo nitya shashvatoyang purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.